So this is really written almost as like a study, like in process, sticking to a plan.
Yeah.
And there's almost like no reason other than that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's good to know, because I think, if you told me it was for a concert, I might have different thoughts about it than if you told me it was, a soundtrack, or if you told me it was, I don't know, for your like grandma's 80th birthday.
True. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but nonetheless, it is for real people, and we still want it to sound cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Welcome to a very special episode of Let's Write with a Plan. I took the piece we've been developing throughout this series and showed it to Robert Honstein, who's an amazing composer and one of my favorites. And Robert had a lot of really great things to say, really useful feedback and constructive criticism that I've already used to make the piece a lot better. So here's our conversation. I hope you enjoy and learn a lot from Robert's great advice.
Just curious, like, were you listening to anything, or was there anything consciously like inspiring you?
Well, when I was first going at it, I was making something that was really impatient, and then I realized I was like in the mood to feel something grow. So then I was, I went into minimalism mode in my head a little bit. But kind of like what you were saying before when we hung out last time about how you like the aesthetic of minimalism, but you don't necessarily stick to it. And that was kind of where I was at too.
I like the sound of a process, but not necessarily the actual process.
Most of my experience writing for string quartet is writing parts that will go to an album.
Right.
Like just as padding.
Yeah.
So, and I know like the players.
So these are people you know.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's cool. That's good to know too.
Yeah.
I mean, because like a lot of the time, in a lesson or something, like there's a lot of conversation about the score, right? And like how it's presented and how your ideas are put on the paper, because ultimately it's about communicating your ideas to a musician. And a lot of times composers find themselves in situations where they're with musicians they don't know, or they might not even be there. And so in that case, the score kind of has a bigger job to do than if you're working with people you know. You know what I mean? Because if you're working with people that you don't know or you're not there, kind of everything needs to be on the page that is necessary to communicate your idea, because presumably you won't be there.
Right.
But now, that said, I still think it's important to try to get things as clear as possible, but because you're going to be there, because you know these people, it's a little bit looser, because you could be rehearsing, you can just be like, actually I want it to sound like blah 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 blah, or like hey, why don't you try it this way. You can have this kind of like dialogue and try out stuff, so it's not quite as crucial, I would say, that everything is like just perfectly detailed and all that kind of thing.
Just from looking at this, does it seem like fairly blank for
yeah, I would say. I mean, yes, there's some dynamics which are cool, but like not a lot of articulation, no bowing marks, a little bit, I see, although I'm curious what you're thinking about with some of these, but anyway, there's not a lot of articulation and phrasing. Play a note and you can play it in like 10 different ways. You can play it normally, you can play it with vibrato, with no vibrato, you could play it, put the bow close to the bridge and it's a ponticello, which is this kind of metallic raspy sound. You could put the bow near to the fingerboard and it's like a more sort of muted fluty like sound. You can bow at what they call it the frog, which is like a heavier sound, or you can blow at the tip, which is a lighter sound. There are so many different ways, and there are kind of two thoughts. One thought is you micromanage everything. Everything's just completely spelled out, and if you really, really know what you're doing, that could be great. Another way is to just kind of use language, just use character words. Just be like, you could be like a smoky, hazy sound in the distance or whatever.
Write that in.
Write that in, exactly. Or you could be like sharp, dry, and articulate, and write that in. And like, and a string player will read that and think, oh, okay, and then they'll kind of try to make a sound that does that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think one way or the other, there needs to be some information about the sound.
Cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see you've done this bowing so that there's a bit of overlapping, so which kind of I think is good because that does get you the washiness. I don't think you want a ponticello or anything because I don't think you want that sound, but maybe it's a little tasto or something like I don't know if you want like a muted.
What's tasto?
That's just towards the fingerboard.
Okay,
close
it's
to
the flutish.
It can be a flutish sound. But it's just a little more muted. So you can just think about overtones. Like if it's towards the fingerboard, towards the bridge, ponticello, you're really accentuating the higher partials, bringing those out. So it kind of dirties up the tone a bit. If you're towards the fingerboard, you're kind of muting some of that a little bit. So it's a little bit sort of a more muted sound. But actually I think where the question becomes more important is with the solo voice.
Right.
Like, what is that? Because that's a different texture. Like
it's supposed to be expressive. Like
there you go. So even that, like just saying espressivo or lyrical or cantabile, like or you could just say like romantic sappy string, or you could say like like schmaltzy, but I don't know. See, that's what the thing, I don't know if that's what you want. Do you really want schmaltzy? No, I don't think so. I think you want something expressive, but not like that's not what you're going for, right? If you just kind of say lyrical expressive, they'll play it like a soloist and they'll kind of like color it and shade it and get. But I do think you run the risk of just a total monotony of the background. Do you know what I mean? But I know the MIDI is kind of totally dead and just doing the same thing. But like if I were playing this or if I were writing this, I'd want there to be a little bit of shape to it. Do you know what I mean? Like a little bit of kind of some sort of maybe dynamic oscillation, nothing too dramatic, and maybe it's just something that happens in the breaks, like as this melody goes, this maybe the background kind of rises, so there's just a bit of like this melody kind of rises, and then as it falls, this kind of just pops out a bit, and then this comes in, and as it falls, that pops. Just so there's a bit of a dynamic interplay between the foreground, which is the solo, and the background, which is the oscillating texture. I think it just it gives it a little bit more life, because what it does is it tells the players that you're thinking about this and that it matters.
Okay.
And it's gonna sort of switch on that little knob in their brain and think, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not just supposed to be like a robot going just this mezzo piano with change the whole time. So I don't know. Thinking about that, maybe places where the texture can kind of like dynamically swell and contract a little bit, just to give it a little shape. I like the repetition of this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You repeat the same 5 times. Maybe if I could see around, you repeat at the same time 2 or 3 times, but maybe just for variety, it could just maybe change a note or two, like. Just in a way so that's like there's a little bit of like, because this is very surprising. Yeah. When this happens, you know what I mean? And it could be an interesting thing if maybe the top note is like changing just a little bit, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's what was happening. It was going there. You're going for a static vibe, but just because you're creating the feeling of stasis doesn't mean that it's actually totally static. And that even just finding just a subtle little way that there's some motion, it almost like makes it so that motion, it gives it a bit of energy so that when you go to the C sharp, it feels like it was supposed to happen. It might be fun to play around with how you orchestrate this idea. Like right now, you just have right there, you can do it like, or you can do it so many different ways. I know the gesture because all of the strings are in this middle register. Yeah. Everything's in the middle. So this idea is that it's going to be like floating above it. Yeah. But I feel like even, if you're really not floating above it, then like also accessing the higher octaves would really create a sense. Or like, that would really, or get rid of this one, just have it be up here. Whatever. The dissonance becomes, I think, less of a problem for me.
If it's higher.
Yeah, because it really feels like another planet. You know what I mean? Like we have two worlds. We have this world of the strings, and we have these distant bells, and they're not talking to each other yet. Totally. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know, something to think about.
I do feel like in some of this, the sort of dramatic middle section, that the doubling of the bells sometimes seems pointless. Like, I don't know, I just lose it a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
I think it gets lost in the mix.
Yeah.
Maybe it should be up an octave.
Yeah, or it wouldn't be so bad to cut it out a few times so that when it comes back, it's special.
That's interesting.
You know what I mean? Sometimes less is more on that kind of front. You know, it's a special sound, and if you overuse it, then it loses its specialness. Just rather than having like everything be doubled by the bells of the piano, maybe just the key notes, the rival, like maybe that A, maybe that's just the A C sharp or something, A D, A C sharp. You know what I mean? Just like the key things rather than everything. Because I feel like a lot of these repeated notes, bum, 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 you know, it's like they're a gesture that are meant to like, you know, get you to a downbeat or get you to an important moment. So if you're thinking about it orchestrationally, then the whole idea is that you're highlighting the moment. Bum, 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 da, da.
So you'd use the bells to highlight the piano, or both piano highlighting?
Well, I feel like the piano might be a little more effective at the bum, ba, 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 like the lead up, the anticipation.
Okay.
And the bells, I think, would be really effective at
the emphasis.
The emphasis. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like a ping. It's like, it's like
I learned
turning a light on, you know?
I got everything I know about pings from you.
Oh, really? You start to break out of the just like Boda oscillation, which is great. I think that's really, really great. I'm going to skip the dramatic part for a moment. I'm going to come back to that and talk about the end. I don't know. I feel like this might be an opportunity to maybe think about maybe some pizzicato could happen a little bit, or just something to give us a little bit of a break in the color. You know what I mean? Like in hearing just bowed strings so much.
Yeah.
And then I was also just thinking about the accompaniment. It comes back in the piano, and that's cool. But I don't know. I kind of wish that it would be a little different. You know, we've gone through this journey of the middle section, and it's gotten like dramatic and pitches, it's kind of moved around a bit, and it's getting more exciting. And we get right back, and it's basically the same exact idea of an accompaniment at the end, as if nothing has happened to it. You know what I mean? I mean, I think it's actually, I really like this idea of the way the bell idea, it comes back in the quartet in this kind of canonic way. I think that's gonna be really good. That's really effective. But I feel like, you know, you right now you just kind of are repeating just the you know, whatever it is. But you know, maybe it could be a little variety. You know, I don't know, just a little bit. Just like in terms of, you know, even just keep the eighth note chugga chugga chugga, but maybe just the top notes or something have a little bit. So just a little bit of a dance, just not too much. Just so there's just a little bit of life in there. It's not just 100% just flat. Because I just feel like the trajectory, the idea of this piece, that's actually interesting, because you originally started this with, this is going to be a ABCBA form, but and it is, but I think actually there's two things happening. There's the sectional, like when the material, like you know, I want to use the theme as much as possible, and ABC, that happens. But then I actually think there's also like a sort of dramatic arc, which is almost more just like there's a big ramp to a climactic moment, and then there's like this epilogue. It's almost like two-part in a way. Do you know what I mean? And that's interesting. That I feel like there's like a tension. There's something between like the motivic thematic structure and the kind of dramatic structure.
Interesting.
You know what I mean? And so I feel like you get to this big arrival right here, right? And we come back to the beginning world, but it's slightly different. I kind of want to hear that in that music. It's not just in the material, you know, but also somehow this accompaniment is slightly changed as well. Do you know what I mean? Because we've been on a journey, and what does it say that we've been on the journey and we come back to exactly the same place? It doesn't feel like that's what happens. It feels like
learned something.
Something happened, right? Yeah, exactly. And I really think that you can achieve that in a relatively simple way without changing too much.
When you're teaching, like, what's the most you ever change a piece? Like, do you ever be like, this is fundamentally broken? Or
that's so interesting. That's a really hard question. I don't feel like, well, it's tough to say because it's a negotiation between me and the student, and I feel like there are a lot of questions at play. Like, is this a second-year master's student or is this a freshman? Is this a project that, you know, is this the end of the year or the beginning of the year? Like, as in, have I worked with them a lot already and I kind of know a bunch about where they've been and where they're going? Or is this like the first time we've ever met? Is this something that, are they the kind of person that spends way too long on something? Or are they the kind of person that spends way too little time on something and just kind of turns it out? Do you know what I mean? I think all of these things go into answering that question. Part of what you're asking is like, when do you sign a cut your losses, or when do you like dig in and just like take it apart?
Right.
You know what I mean? And like, I think the answer to that is dependent on so many factors. And I mean, I think especially if it's a younger student just starting out, I think I might be more likely to be like, let's throw it away and start over again. Just glancing through this. In this bar, you have the first violin going, second violin going. And just something to think about when you're doing string quartet, right? One part writing is to just be aware of when the unisons are happening. Because a unison with two strings is tricky to tune, especially if it's going fast. And if you look on this type of configuration, the C is always unison between the first second. You know what I mean? So it's going. So even if it was just like that, or somehow that C was in unison, I think it would guarantee lock and tune better.
So AC.
Yeah, you could go, or something different.
Cool.
It's a little better, because it's always tricky just to tune unisons between two people. If you were in a string section, it wouldn't be an issue. Once you have three or more people, that kind of tuning is a little bit easier.
More forgiving.
Yeah, more forgiving. One thought as we get to the more intense dramatic thing, and you're doing a little bit, is some more variety maybe in the rhythmic subdivisions that are going on. And we're pretty solidly locked into a lot of eighth notes, some quarter notes. You're working in the triplets, and you get the 16th notes. But the 16th notes and the triplets, they feel like, you know, they're exceptions to the rule, and that for the most part we're just in the chugga chugga chugga. And I think that a lot of times it's the inner voices that are overlooked. You know what I mean? It's kind of the last thing you might think about, and that actually so much kind of power and momentum can come from what goes on in the inner voices. And you know, maybe as you get to a climax, it could be some combination of a rhythmic thing and also even just a gestural thing.
It's like up.
And you do get shape, but these are just like, and stuff like this, where, you know, where you're doing a little bit where you have these. That's good. I think that's adding something to it. But to me, that's still, it's a regularity. It's like an arpeggiation. Do you know what I mean? I'm really thinking about a gestural thing that might happen across a larger phrase, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because this stuff, like, I was just kind of scoring chord by chord.
Yeah.
Like, all right, let's adapt to the chords, but I wasn't really thinking about the broad shape back when I was filling this out.
Yeah. That's what it looks like. It looks like you're exactly what you said. It was what it looks like. Like you're filling out the chords, And that's cool. It creates a little bit of variety, but I think even more powerful thing would be to think about the bigger shape and say, not only am I filling out the chords, but I'm also trying to articulate this larger phrase that's happening, you know, that goes like this, some kind of contour to how it goes up and down, and then we maybe arrive somewhere or whatever.
That's awesome.
So often the inner voices or the accompaniments are just kind of, in a registral sense, are just kind of like locked into wherever they are. So if as you get more dramatic, if those start to kind of move a little bit, I think it can create some momentum. And also maybe even some rhythmic thing, like you could just, a very simple thing that could be done on the string could be even just double notes. So it's like, you know, I mean, you have the 16th notes, dum, dum, with the scale, which is cool. But you could keep these exactly as they are, but just do doubles, like, you know, just add a little bit of like a kind of like, you know, flurry, rushed quality to it here and there, just like, you know, tastefully, not everywhere. You know,
there's like a story that's told across the whole section in the middle voices part.
Yeah, that, and I like that way of thinking about that, a story that's told, because each section does have a story. It's already there. I'm not making it up. It has a shape. It's going somewhere. And then I think as a composer, you can go down to every level of detail and sort of ask yourself, is this telling the story? Is this helping to tell the story? Yeah.
Dude. Hell yeah.
Let's call it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
I hope that was
so helpful. Yeah.